Welcome back to the 21st. I'm Brian Mackey. Jim Thompson was Illinois' longest-serving governor. The moderate Republican was first elected in 1976 and was then re-elected 3 times, ending his time in office in January of 1991. Standing at 6 feet 6 inches tall, he was known to the press as Big Jim. Thompson, after his time in politics, went on to lead the international law firm of Winston & Strawn, arguing several cases before the Illinois Supreme Court. He was also co-chair of the 9/11 Commission, which investigated the terrorist attacks on America. Governor Thompson passed away August 14th in Chicago at the age of 84. Joining us now are 2 people who worked in Governor Thompson's administration. Karen Witter was assistant to the governor for natural resources. Karen, welcome to the 21st.
Thank you.
Also joining us is former State Senator Kirk Dillard, who was legislative liaison for Governor Jim Thompson and is currently chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority. Kirk Dillard, welcome to the 21st to you as well.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here.
And listeners, have you lived in Illinois long enough to remember Governor Jim Thompson? For those of us of a certain age, he seemed to be the only person ever governor of Illinois, at least until we reached a certain age. You can join the conversation with your Thompson memories at 800-222-9455. The number again is 800-222-9455. And I guess I should just begin by saying, Karen and Kirk, to both of you, my condolences. I know you worked closely with him for a long time. Karen, can you begin by telling us, what was Thompson's campaign style like?
Well, there was nobody like Big Jim. And what I would say about him is he was so gregarious and he was so comfortable around all kinds of people. In any kind of a crowd, he would want to talk to people. We've heard a lot about him with the union workers on the grounds of the mansion, but he was equally comfortable engaging in a conversation with the Nobel Prize winner and artisans and all kinds of people. I would say that he had a really big tent. And there was a wide range of staff that worked for him. And Kirk and I actually had the opportunity to work together when I was on the program policy staff and Kirk was in the legislative office. But he was masterful at being able to work a crowd and enjoy doing it.
You know, we've actually got some tape of Thompson in an interview for an oral history project with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Here he is talking about some of those interactions he had with crowds.
They took pictures of their kids standing next to me year after year in the same spot, in effect using me as a giant measuring stick to show how their kids had grown. And they put these cards up on the mantle, or these pictures up on the mantle in their houses. And the other thing that the crowd did, mostly younger people, would be to hand me beers. And I'd march down the street and I'd take a swig of beer and I'd pass it off to Skilbeck or one of the crew. And then people would give me another and another and another and another. And so by the time I got through with that parade, I was pretty well paraded out. But the affection, that you get from people like that, it was extraordinary.
The dangers of campaigning and accepting beers on the parade route, I guess. He was also known when campaigning for doing a sort of, I guess nowadays we'd call it code switching, right? He grew up in Chicago, but when he went to Southern Illinois, he sometimes deployed a drawl. And we have just another little bit of tape. Let's listen to this NPR report from 1978 by Scott Simon.
He was the obvious Republican possibility for governor last year, but some Republicans wondered about his political instincts. Those may still be uncertain, but he became a superbly successful campaigner, with the trial lawyer's instinct for immersing himself in the idiom of his audience. WSSR in Springfield taped Mr. Thompson addressing a revival meeting in Southern Illinois, replete with Southern accent.
We've had too much of that kind of promising politics. Promise us a road, promise us a lake, promise us a bridge, promise us a dam, promise us everything, promise what you think we want to hear. And
WBEZ in Chicago taped the future governor speaking of his rivalry with Mayor Daley to Southside steelworkers.
The reason Daley wants to whip me is not because I'm a Republican, but because I was the guy that stood up and said, hey, enough is enough. And I don't mind they're saying what they're saying. I mean, he wants to go be Nixon's prosecutor, okay. He wants to, you know, yell about the case, it's okay, because nobody believes it anyway. You know, for him to say that and then just not prove it, bullshit. You know, he meant what he meant.
Well,
that's the part I don't like.
You're Republican, I like your style.
Okay.
It's not really a conscious thing. It's a sense of being at ease with people, I think. And if you're at ease with people, you pick up the mannerisms which they reflect and which surround you at the time. Nothing wrong with that.
Let's hear it for Jim Thompson and the whole ticket, ladies and gentlemen.
So, Kirk Dillard, did you ever hear Governor Thompson, talking one way to people on the south side of Chicago and maybe another way in southern Illinois? Was he that way with lawmakers as well?
Well, he was a master chameleon in a very good sense. It was funny. The Peoria Journal-Star had a story last week about how Governor Thompson, with students at Western Illinois University, where I attended and Karen's husband attended, and I was there when I saw Jim Thompson maybe drink out of a toilet plunger peach schnapps. He was amazing. He would work parades both sides of the street, and then he would work them backward as well. And he would usually wear a Walter Payton jersey if he was in the Chicago area when he campaigned. And he was a master. I mean, he was a great trial lawyer as the United States Attorney in Chicago. You have to remember he was a law professor. This is a national public radio station broadcast, but Jim Thompson was a tremendous criminal law professor that wrote one of the largest selling criminal law case books in history. And, he was great. And again, this is an NPR station. One thing that Jim Thompson did that, and Governor Edgar did it as well, but Jim Thompson was a regular on college campuses. I mentioned I saw him at Western Illinois University. In fact, I first met him at Western Illinois University when he was young and skinny in 1976. He was campaigning, but he was at the U of I frequently. He would put on war paint when it was before it became politically incorrect to do so. He was there for the Beckman groundbreaking of the Beckman Institute. I was with him at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena when he went out and met with Mr. Beckman, as well as his wife Mabel, and they ate peanut butter sandwiches. And Jim Thompson brought back millions of dollars with President Eikenberry of the U of I to create the Beckman Institute at Illinois. The Farm Aid concert, who could forget that at the U of I with Willie Nelson and Neil Young and John Cougar Mellencamp. And then one of the things, and maybe it was Karen that wrote about it in a nice piece she did, or it could have been Steve McClure, who used to be head of the business and economic development in Illinois. But Jim Thompson, when we didn't win the superconductor, super collider contract from the federal government, got Leon Letterman, a Nobel Prize winner, and we created a thing called the Illinois Coalition so that we could better compete as a state for federal research grants and economic development money. And Jim Thompson in the 70s and 80s was really focused on science and technology. And those are things that sometimes get overlooked when they talk about how he kept the White Sox in Chicago, or he had the vision to expand McCormick Place,
right,
or really turn Navy Pier from a decaying thing that stuck out in Lake Michigan into the state's #1 tourist attraction. And Jim Thompson was a U of I student at the old Navy Pier in Chicago.
Well, Karen Witter, you mentioned that Thompson is known to have a better record on the environment than many Republicans. Let's talk about some of these policies. Why do you think that was?
I think what's remarkable is when you talk about the different categories of things that Thompson did, he had so many significant accomplishments in so many different areas. First and foremost, what strikes me about Governor Thompson is that he was smart and he listened to a lot of people. And when one time Mike Whitty, who was the director of the Department of Conservation, came into the office and he said, "I've just promised the environmental community that we're going to have a meeting with Governor Thompson, so we have to make that happen." Well, this meeting turned into a 5-hour meeting with the governor, listening to presentations by the environmental community about all kinds of issues, from solid waste to groundwater protection to recycling, and the fact that he was willing to listen. He invested money in natural areas acquisition as part of the Build Illinois program. So as there were programs that related to economic development, there was also a piece related to conservation. And I think he had very wide interests. He was interested in cultural resources and the arts. And I think that he really did see that the environment, the arts, all of these things enrich the quality of life. And if you're going to attract businesses to Illinois, you have to have cultural and natural kinds of resources that make Illinois a place that people want to come to.
Yeah, and he helped in Springfield. He helped restore the Dana Thomas House, or at least make that a priority for the state. And of course, the Thompson Center, polarizing as it is one of the most distinctive architectural government buildings in the country, and possibly in the world, I would argue. Right?
Another thing, Brian, this is Kirk. He cared greatly about the Department of Natural Resources. It was called conservation at one point in time. Karen's the expert on it, but Jim Thompson loved our state parks. He loved eating fried chicken at the giant city state park. He loved going to Starved Rock. Jim Thompson really put a lot of money into our state parks. He could have been the governor of Wisconsin with that kind of record and love for our state parks and outdoors.
Yeah, and Karen Witter, we've only, and I should say, we're speaking with Kirk Dillard and Karen Witter, who are both officials, aides to Governor Jim Thompson, who died this month, and we're remembering his life and legacy in office. Karen, can you talk about how he came to policy decisions? I mean, he really rolled up his sleeves and got personally involved in these issues, right?
What was interesting to me is that when it came to bills that had been passed by the legislature, he didn't act on those bills until he had the comprehensive bill file to review. So once the legislature went home, the staff were really busy conducting all of these bill reviews. Kirk and I would be on bill review teams together with agencies, and there would be a comprehensive review of what are the policy implications, the budgetary implications, how much is it going to cost, who's for it, who's against it, who proposed it in the legislature. And he understood all of those when he made decisions. And so more so than about anybody I can think of, and certainly in terms of what we see today in politics, he made informed decisions. Sometimes politics of the moment won the day, sometimes it was a policy issue, sometimes it was a budgetary issue, but he knew the whole range of issues when he made decisions. And if you put something in a bill review or a briefing paper, it better be right, because if it was on page 12, you might be hearing about it coming out of what he would say.
Kirk, last week I was talking to a former state legislator who told me Thompson was a master deal maker and almost agnostic to philosophical differences. I wonder if you share that view or think that's a fair description of him.
It is. I wouldn't say he was completely agnostic. He did have fiscal principles that he adhered to. When he was governor, we generally had a AAA state credit rating. So, he had some fiscal constraints. It's interesting as I watch a lot of battles over capital projects. Jim Thompson would pretty much rely on the recommendations of experts. When he was governor of the Illinois Board of Higher Education's list of capital projects for the U of I, and the U of I did very well because of Senator Stanley Weaver, for the legendary majority leader who I sat next to for about 10 years in the state Senate. But Jim Thompson clearly, had his fiscal priorities, but he would get as far as he could from a Republican standpoint. And then he would start to compromise, and was a master negotiator who hated to not get things done or get things passed by the legislature.
Kirk, when you ran for governor in the post-Blagojevich election of 2010, in my memory, I remember you sort of pitching yourself as a sort of a return to Thompson-like reasonableness and competence in governing Illinois. I wonder, what does it say about Illinois voters and the state that maybe we have not had another governor quite like that, at least in recent decades.
Well, Jim Thompson had no enemies. Today's in politics, he taught me that, today's adversary could be your biggest ally 4 years from now. Jim Thompson was a man who only saw the goodness in people. He had, as I said, no enemies, and he was a gentleman, a true gentleman. And that is so lost in today's rough and tumble political world. Jim Edgar, who I was the chief of staff for, was a gentleman as well, but had a different style than Thompson. But Thompson was a roll up your sleeves. We're going to not get out of this room until we have a deal type of negotiator. And then working for Jim Thompson was fun. Let me tell you, Karen or any of us who worked for Jim Thompson, we had a blast. We had Willie Nelson around at the state fair. Governor Thompson would go down that giant slide. So it was fun. But was he an agnostic? He clearly was flexible, had his fiscal principles, but he hated not to get the deal done. When you wanted something done, you went to Jim Thompson because he could generally deliver.
Kirk Dillard is the chairman of the RTA, former state legislator and legislative liaison for Governor Jim Thompson. We've also been speaking with Karen Witter, who is assistant to the governor, Jim Thompson, for natural resources. Thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your memories of Governor Thompson.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up after the break, we're going to be having an interview with Republican Mark Curran. He's the former Lake County Sheriff, and he's the current Republican nominee challenging incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator Dick Durbin for the Illinois Senate seat this November. That conversation after a short break. Our phone lines are open. If you have questions for Mr. Curran, the number is 800-222-9455. That's 800-222-9455. You can also always tweet us at 21st Show. More to come after a short break. Stay with us.